This is The Extra Point, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast, sponsored by your Phoenix Suns.
Well, what a time to be a Valley sports fan. Arizona Cardinals coming off a bye week, first place in the NFC West. The Suns are going to be fine once Kevin Durant gets back. And it's a good time to be an Arizona State SunDevil. The only thing hotter than the SunDevils football team right now is SunDevil sources Chris Karpman, who's been working around the clock chronicling the football team's ascension into the top 25. He joins us now on the Extra Point podcast. And Chris, I just want to start off by saying, thrilled for you, know how hard you work, know how difficult the last 10 years or so has been. So what's it been like to watch the SunDevils re-enter the top 25?
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing for ASU fans. They went to the bottom of the barrel there for a couple of years, right? Consecutive 3-win seasons, worst since World War II. Fan apathy at an all-time high, frustration with the administration beyond your wildest imagination. And to come back from that to what's transpired this year has felt like kind of a magical season. I've said it's similar in some ways to 2007, which was Dennis Erickson's first year. There was a big culture change that happened, and the team reeled off like 7 wins in a row to start the season. Nobody really expected it on its way to a 10-win season. ASU's had a bunch of lucky breaks, but also made its own luck, playing big in important moments and winning close games, come from behind fourth quarters. There's a resiliency, there's a toughness, there's just something that sports fans can identify, but without maybe being able to put your finger on exactly what it is, but it's a good thing. And it's happening right now in Tempe.
Do you wish you would have gone over to Chaparral High School more in 2012, 2013 and watched Kenny Dillingham as Charlie Ragel's trusty assistant trying to learn the business and put together the pieces to get SunDevil football to where it is now?
I'll tell you a funny story. So I knew Dillingham a little bit when he was a GA at ASU in 2014. He was working for Chip Long, who was a recruiting coordinator under Todd Graham, and Mike Norvell, who was offensive coordinator, obviously his biggest mentor. And even though he played a very sort of a small behind the scenes role at the time, you could just tell that he had big aspirations. And then when he moved on to work at Memphis, and then Auburn and Florida State, he would message me every so often saying that he wanted to be ASU's head coach, and I'm saying to myself, okay, buddy, you're like in your 20s, like a lot of people have these sort of big dreams. And then when Herm Edwards became the coach at ASU, he sent me a message saying, I want to be the next head coach at ASU. And he was 27 or something. And I'm like, sure, buddy. Okay. Like, that's cool. And I'm not being rude to him or whatever. And then when it happens, he's like, see, I told you. And I was like, yeah, you kind of did. But that's the kind of thing, because lots of people in this, you do this a long time and you cover a lot of young coaches who are promising up and comers, and they all talk about their aspirations and their hopes. But there's something that's just different about this guy. He's cut different, Mark.
Well, and that hopefully calms a lot of fears for SunDevil fans, because after the win over Kansas State and this big game looming this weekend for BYU, there's already like, is Kenny going to stay? Well, what happens if he wins this? What happens if they go to the college football playoff? Are they going to be able to pay him enough? Are they going to be able to pay his assistants enough? Is Sam Levitt going to leave? And then it's like a totally different conversation that we've had around here for 10 years. So I guess in your mind, Kenny Dillingham, is he a SunDevil for life?
I don't know if he will be. I think that he should be, right? I have wrote a column. You look at the success that some other coaches around the country have experienced. Indiana's coach in his first year is Curt Cignetti. He's like 10-0 for the first time in Indiana history. And even though he's still in his first year of his contract, they basically ripped it up and they gave him an 8-year deal worth $8 million a year. It's twice as long and twice as much as Kenny Dillingham's contract. And if I'm an athletic director at any of these schools around the country, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, who's in touch with the contemporary state of play in Division I football, who's young, who connects with his players at a high level, who gets everybody bought in, who understands NIL. Uh, check, 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 check. Kenny Dillingham, right? So I feel like he's got to be loyal to a certain extent, but to what extent it remains to be seen, given whatever opportunities exist and how well compensated that his staff is, how good of a job that in this new iteration of college athletics, where schools are going to be paying players beginning next fall directly, how much that leads to an ability to retain their top players, acquire talent from the transfer portal. Those are the things that ultimately will determine whether or not he feels like what he's accomplishing now is sustainable and can even be built out further.
Biggest game in Tempe at Mountain America / SunDevil Stadium since when, in your opinion, this week, the BYU game?
2014, ASU and Notre Dame were both ranked around the top 10. I think it was number 9 versus number 10. It was a day game. Notre Dame had like 4 or 5 turnovers in that game. It was like everything kind of went right for ASU in a day game at SunDevil Stadium, now Mountain America Stadium. People will remember, though, that the following week, ASU went up to Corvallis. I think it was the number 6 team maybe in the CFP playoff, and suffered a really bad loss to Oregon State. And then it was a 10-win season, still an impressive season. But I would say you got to go back then to find a game that has as much meaning as this one, with all of the Big 12 championship game implications and what could happen beyond that. Basically, the playoff has already started for ASU. Keep winning, and the likelihood of being able to keep playing in bigger games is out there.
Have you allowed yourself to imagine Arizona State hosting the Fiesta Bowl?
I haven't really thought about that, Mark. I try to get through like
are you one week at a time, one game at a time, one play at a time, offense, defense, special teams?
Yeah, I went to ASU in the Bruce Snyder era. That's one win at a time. So, is it possible? Yes. Was it inconceivable a month or 2 months ago? Absolutely. But here we are. And listen, the Big 12 move for ASU was probably the best thing that could have ever happened. Now, it was almost a lucky thing that happened because Michael Crow and a lot of the Pac-12 leadership wanted to hang on to that thing. But remember, last year in the Pac-12, as a good example, Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, they got Heisman Trophy quarterbacks all over the place. It's a tougher conference to play in than what this current version of the Big 12 is. And once all of these like NIL and schools paying players sort of equalizes, I feel like ASU has a great chance to be one of the more talented, better coached teams in the Big 12 for a long time. So we're potentially entering a gilded era of ASU football that people haven't seen in decades. And I don't mean to get people too excited when I say that, but I have never said that in 20 years of covering ASU.
Potentially a more loaded roster than Herm had right before COVID, before everybody scattered and won Heisman trophies other places and went to the NFL?
That's a good question. I would say probably not. Of course, the dubious manner in which that roster was built is now sort of understood by everyone, including ASU's fans. But what I would say is that program lacked discipline. That was the most penalized team in the country or thereabouts. Very similar to Dennis Erickson's era. They were the players, coaches, quote unquote, that were, hey, if you guys want to do it, you guys can be in charge and make sure that you guys are setting the expectations and all that. It doesn't really work with college athletes. And that's the thing about Dillingham that makes him special, in my opinion, is he understands how to push and motivate players to try to get the most out of them while also kind of loving them up and making them feel good about the experience.
Had I told you 5 years ago that you could help get an Arizona State football player a car, what would you have told me?
Listen, it's crazy because I just built, I just put in the work that helped a community take shape. And the community does all these things on its own. Like, I didn't even know that was happening until there was already like over $10,000 in people pledging toward Jordan Crook getting a car. And yeah, I know Parker Jones with Verde Valley Ford. He's a great guy, and he's on the board. But he took it upon himself. And this is a community, Mark, that they paid for the 70-7 Territorial Cup billboard entirely that a lot of people know about. That was all people in the Devil Sanctuary on SunDevil Source. And they paid for 3 legacy bricks. So actually, the copies of them are right behind me, where the ones that are outside of the stadium that people can walk by. They've done all these kinds of things entirely on their own. I've had nothing to do with it, but it's a reflection of the passion that comes out of people when they are so invested in the performance of these teams, and that's pretty cool to see.
Is the money there to sustain this thing long term, to make ASU say in the Big 12 what a USC was to the Pac-12?
Well, the House versus the NCAA settlement is going to really change everything. That's going to not be formalized until April, I believe. But you're going to see schools be able to distribute up to $20.5 million to their athletes. There's some questions about how that's going to work with Title IX considerations, which sports are going to get how much money, and all these things that have to be determined. But what I would say is it should offset to a large degree the disparity that exists right now. So Ohio State's athletic director, for example, said that football team has a $20 million or more roster, all NIL. ASU is more like $3 to $4 million right now. But what's going to happen is when this is sort of new era is ushered in, as they have articulated it in the settlement conversation, there's going to be a committee that looks at fair market valuation of NIL deals. And so a lot of the fake NIL should go away if that actually ends up coming to fruition. And you might see ASU only be outgunned at a 2 or 3x multiple rather than a 7x multiple. And what that means is there should be more parity that starts coming into college football, such that it's easier to retain players. A place like ASU might be able to get more transfers from the non-2 deep players at some of these elite schools, that guys that would be starters at ASU, but they're the 4th or 5th wide receiver or the 2nd tight end at a USC or Ohio State or Texas or some of these schools. So those things, if Michael Crow and Graham Rossini do a good job of servicing ASU's athletes, relative to what will happen with other teams, certainly allows for the possibility, as I was saying earlier, of ushering ASU into the best era of college athletics in Tempe in a very long time.
The Gilded Age with the golden helmet. Love it. It's good for business around here, and we're all for it here at Arizona's Family. Jordan Tyson, when he came in from Colorado, did you expect the kind of output that he has given Kenny Dillingham?
I didn't know, because he had a very serious knee injury in November of his freshman year. Prior to that point, he was leading Colorado in yards per catch and receiving yards, looked like a very dynamic player. The guy that I saw on film, I thought could be equivalent roughly to Elijah Badger. But then last year, watching him in practices, he was not all the way back, not even close, I would say, even until the end of the season. So you're a full year removed from an injury like that, where he had multiple ligament tears, and you wonder, like, okay, when is he going to get that full explosiveness back to his game? But then this spring, he looked like that finally was happening, and from then till August, he took it up another notch. And at that point, I said that he was ASU's best NFL draft prospect publicly in August. So I did expect this, but just not until early before the season had started.
And what does ASU have to do to win the game on Saturday?
It's always comes down to red zone efficiency, third down. You saw against Kansas State, ASU executed at a very high level on third downs and did better on third down defense. Third down defense has been a problem for this team throughout the season, one of the few areas in which it's kind of struggled. And then the Sun Devils have not needed to kick too many field goals, which has been a weakness of theirs this season. If that continues to where they can put the ball in the end zone, and then they finish the game in the fourth quarter, I think they're in a good position.
A lot of blue in the stadium. What I mean, it looks like it's a sellout, and I don't know that beer sales are going to be that high this weekend with BYU coming to town. But what do you expect the stadium to look like?
I'm going to guess like maybe 10,000 BYU fans. I think it'll be about, 20% BYU, maybe a little bit less than that. When ASU has tended to have these types of situations, that's when the fans are willing to pay a premium on the secondary markets for tickets. And so maybe it'll be a little bit less than that. But BYU also has an inherently built-in community here that's probably second behind Utah, so that I think it'll have a good turnout.
No, it's going to be a fun atmosphere, and I mean, just it's gonna. This is activating the Valley, isn't it? Kenny Dillingham has activated the Valley.
He talked about it, and everyone was like, "Okay, buddy, yeah, you're going to activate the Valley, sure." And then now it's like, "Oh, wait a second, this is one of the hottest tickets in the country this week." So kudos to him and the rest of the staff and the players for doing the job that they have.
All right, and how are you going to get it all done? You got ASU hockey versus Denver, hoops versus Cal Poly. You've got BYU, ASU. Are you going to sleep this weekend?
I'm going to try, because I don't function quite well anymore if I don't get at least like 5 or 6 hours. So I try to force myself to get it in. Fortunately, I got some really good interns that'll be at some of these events helping out. But this time of year, this crossover season is the most challenging, I would say.
And what was the post-game numbers? What were they like? I mean, after that win on Saturday, did you even go to sleep, or did you just were you just broadcasting all the way back to Kansas City?
Yeah, so we did an unfiltered podcast that was on the drive at like 1:30 in the morning until 3 or 3:30 in the morning. Our flight was at 5:30. So we just rolled right to the airport. We finished all of our work, got all of our content up, hit the plane, slept for maybe an hour and a half on the plane, came back. I took a nap for an hour or 2 hours. Then we went to the basketball game. ASU beat St. Thomas. And then Monday press conference, Tuesday practice. Tomorrow there's practice and a basketball game. I'll be at both. As you said, ASU's playing Denver this weekend in hockey. And we'll be at the football game. So we just keep it moving.
All right, one more for you. This SunDevil Wildcat game that's looming. You know, this is kind of setting up for one of those how it always goes, where one team isn't expected to win. Could that be potentially a trap game at all if ASU is able to get by BYU?
Well, I wouldn't call it a trap game, quote unquote, because it's a territorial cup and the rivalry is always, it's really important to these guys. But you're right. Over the years, if you look at it, you study it. I've been in the building a lot of times when the better team, quote unquote, loses, and for Arizona, that's like a big spoiler opportunity. That's when it tends to mean the most. So never rule anything out in that game. They've been really exciting over the years. Some of the best games I've ever covered, some of the most exciting, thrilling finishes, and super memorable. So I think it's going to be a great environment down there. And I'm looking forward to just wrapping this up, man. This is 20 years for me of not missing an ASU football home game. So the first year that I started covering ASU was 2004. We got credentialed in 2005. ASU last undefeated at home was 2004. And I haven't missed a home game from 2005 till now. And I think maybe 3 or 4 road games. So it's to see this sort of, 180, 360, whatever you want, whatever it is pretty impressive.
Well, it's a good time to be Chris Karpman. We know you are busy. We really appreciate the time, and we can't wait to dial you up post game and see what you have to say. If the SunDevils win this, we'll try to get over there and get you a cot, because I don't think you're sleeping through Christmas.
Yeah, man. Somebody's got to ring the bell outside of Mountain America Stadium if ASU gets a win in this one. I can remember as a student in '96 when ASU won its last few games before it went to the Rose Bowl, that bell was ringing on the outside of the stadium by fans, and that was one of the most memorable things about it. So I'm sure people are listening here who might take a cue and go next to Frank Cush and send that bell into a frenzy.
Ring the bell. Keep Chris Karpman awake there. All right. Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate it. And have a great week.
All right, Mark. We'll see you.
The Extra Point Podcast is a production of 3TV, CBS 5, and azfamily.com in Phoenix, Arizona.